So, spring forward, autumn back. Spring, we had an extra or hour less sleep over the weekend, and I'm certainly feeling it 3 days later. It got me thinking about a certain seminar that I went to a good while back. So I got my notes, and we'll go into it. Better sleep. 8 hours. Teenagers need more sleep. Okay. Sleep affects you physically, neurologically, psychologically, emotionally. And you have what's called the circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is basically you start with a light sleep, then it goes down into a deeper sleep, and then it goes up into an REM, and then it starts over again. And you have something like three rhythms in the night. And basically what happens there is when you go into a deep sleep, your body goes into a stage where it starts recovering. Physically, your body gets an opportunity to repair itself, and your brain as well. It gets a kind of like a hormonal bath, where everything that was clogging it up throughout the day gets flushed away, and after a good night's sleep, you come back into it fresh for the following day. So moving on, sleep deprivation causes weight loss, I'd imagine, memory loss, agitation, low patience, disrupted blood sugar levels, low mood, 70% less immune system. Your immune system goes down big time. Cardiovascular diseases, you've got a far greater risk of stroke or heart disease. Proteins produced, you have an increase in leptin, which makes you feel hungry, and ghrelin, which is a crave for carbohydrates, which probably explains why we all get hungry for crisps and chips late at night when we don't want to sleep, or Weetabix. Problem solving is diminished. That's a big one. Low testosterone, and according to this, 6 days of bad sleep can lead to diabetes. Another mention, sleep and dementia. Amyloid plaque needs to be washed out of the cerebral spinal fluid. So basically, amyloid plaque, I'd imagine it's pretty much the same as tooth decay. There's stuff in there that's gunk in your brain that needs to be flushed out regularly, and if it ain't moving, it's going to cause problems later on in your life. Okay. Hormones, melatonin is suppressed by light, which melatonin is what you need to be able to drift off into sleep. And the reason that you're not drifting off into sleep is possibly because there's a bright light on somewhere and it's distracting you, and it's keeping your melatonin levels high, I guess. Cortisol as well, it acts as a circadian regulator. Cortisol, that's the stress hormone. And I suppose when you think about it, like if you had to get up early the next morning at 6:30, say, and you say to yourself the night before, I have to be up by 6:30, you will get up at 6:30 because your stress levels will make sure you wake up, apparently. So moving on, room sanctuary, 18 degrees Celsius. That's not too hot. No bright lights, no TV, plenty of darkness. Declutter the room. Reading a book is great for helping you fall asleep. Reduce stress through yoga, meditation, nostril breathing, and mindfulness. Mind and body. Eating late isn't good for sleep. Avoid alcohol. Yeah. Natural sunlight. Caffeine after 12. Catastrophizing. If you're catastrophizing the night before, like if you're worried about an appointment that you should be in the next day, like and if you've got that going around in your mind, the idea here is thought diffusion, where you just simply say, I notice my catastrophe, but I'll deal with it in the morning. So that's about that. Keep a journal. Stop watching the clock. So if you're looking at your clock at 4 o'clock in the night, don't. Okay. Sleep routine. digital detox. That's a term for no mobile phone, no internet, no podcasts after 9, 10 o'clock. Don't be watching this crap. Same time every night. Late weekends can cause poor sleeping pattern. Of course, we're all guilty of that, like sleeping in on the Saturday and the Sunday. Kind of sets us up for a bad week the following. Timeline. No, I won't go into that. Exercise. No vigorous exercise before bedtime. Breathing goes down to 6 breaths per minute. And what else do we have? Supplements and nutrition. Magnesium is a relaxant, okay? L-threonine, 100 to 200 milligrams of it. Threonine is a protein. Vitamin B complex helps calm the nervous system. Vitamin D, if your vitamin D levels are low, it leads to a poor sleep. So vitamin D, you get that like in oranges, things like that. That should help you sleep. Create choice point. What are our goals? Support the goal. Choose to respond. Must be something else. But I have a name here, Matt Walker, and he says that sleep is not a luxury. It's a non-negotiable necessity. And finally there, power napping, 20 minutes or less is a great way. For example, like if you did have a bad night's sleep, kind of factor in a quick 20-minute nap later on in the day, and that'll keep your energy levels up while you're going through whatever it is you're going through the following day. So what does that hold for me as a military enthusiast? Way back when I was in the Army Reserve, I remember the first time I slept in a forest, and it was not pleasant at all. It was October, November. It was cold. It was damp, wet. There was a hole in the tarpaulin that I had. I could hear dripping all night, and it was horrible, just horrible. I didn't sleep at all. And sure enough, the next day when we had to break camp, putting everything back, my head just wasn't with it. I was very slow. My hand-eye coordination was way off, and I was really feeling it. It was really bad, and I thought to myself I was going to quit after that, but that was 2002. Subsequent exercises, it became an acquired taste, a great habit to have, a great discipline to get into, because subsequent exercises, I remember sleeping out in the Wicklow Mountains and having a fantastic sleep, only to wake up the next morning to realize that my legs, the bottom part of my sleeping bag was exposed, and there was a layer of frost around my feet, and it never bothered me a bit. During the summertime, when we'd go camping out in the forest during the summer, there was the bug bites, the amount of bugs you'd be eaten with. You just have to get used to it. Like, it's grand to have an insect repellent and mosquito net around your face, but by 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you start getting these itches all over your body. You just shrugged it off, and you lived with it. Later on, things got a bit tougher around 2012 onwards. I remember a particular exercise where it went, normally in the FCA we just did it one night, would be about it, but we were expected to do way more than 24 hours, way more than 24 hours. And my first time doing that, I remember, what do I remember? Oh yeah, we were on a walk, a very long walk that took all night long. And I was so tired because we'd been up since 6:30, 5 o'clock that very morning, and this was about 2:30, 3 o'clock the following morning. And I remember we were crossing a field, and I could see a Frisian cow. It was sure it was a Frisian cow, and I couldn't see any other cattle. But as we were approaching this cow, I just turned to the lads and I says, "Don't spook them, don't spook them. They'll be fine. Don't spook them." Later on, I realised it was actually two directing staff, and it was just the DPM breaking up their bodies that I couldn't believe it. It was two people standing there looking at me. Another point at the walk, I remember looking to my left and seeing I was actually 2 steps away. 2 steps to my left was a ravine well over 200 meters deep. And I remember looking over and saying to myself, Jesus, if I fall down there, I'm going to die. Anyways, I continued on, and it never occurred to me. It was only days later that I realized, Jesus, I could have died that night. Later on into that exercise, I was getting desperate. I looked through the ration pack, and there was an energy drink. So I ripped open the sachet and I just poured it into my cup and poured some hot water into it and stirred it up and drank it down. And for the following 3, 4, 5 hours, I was so alert. My eyes were wide open, and I was thinking 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of everything. And I was on a high. I so wanted to get things done. And later on, I found myself looking at a tent pole and thinking to myself, why am I looking at a tent pole? And another question dawned on me, how long have I been staring at that tent pole? I was just so zoned out. I was just so out of it. But finally, at the culmination of that exercise, I do recall about 150 of us were ushered into this area, and there we were met by about half a dozen officers. And one of those officers, she's a captain. She would have been in her late 20s, early 30s. And she proceeded to give a presentation. And she gave the situation on the ground. She gave the mission that we were to embark on the following day. Situation, mission, the enemy movements, expectations, fire and support. She spent an hour going over all those details, and I was looking at her. She was placed, or she was standing on a rock, so we all had to be looking up at her at the time, and I just couldn't get over how immaculately turned out she was. Her uniform looked like, it looked like she had it pressed recently. She was very clean looking. The orders that she was giving us, the presentation was verbatim. It was perfect. It was very well turned out, very well presented. But you could see it in her eyes. You could tell that this lady had started the exercise before any of us had started the exercise, had been through the whole exercise with us, and she was going to see it out at the very end as well. And I was just looking at her, and I realized that she was so professional and very, very intelligent, rational in her thinking and her presentation. I couldn't get over the level of professionalism that was in her. And it just shows that, like, there's a cadre of officers in the Irish Defence Forces, and they are an extremely high standard group of people. And the reason that we don't hear enough about them is because they're doing their job so damn well, both at home and abroad. They're the reason why so many of us are coming home, or so many of our defence forces are coming home safe and, getting the jobs done. And it's such a credit to them. But that's what I got from her. And again, those officers, their training, their standard of training is far longer than a regular soldier's training. Um, they are briefed, or they have exercised, they're well trained and disciplined on the consequences of sleep deprivation. There's a whole list of rules that they have to go through before they present orders to a large body of men. For example, they have to be well turned out, they have to be clean, they have to be well slept or well rested before they give their presentation. You know, they have to take an awful lot of checks before they can stand in front of us and tell us what needs to be done. Final thoughts on it. I keep thinking about what happened in Ukraine last February last year, when the Russians invaded. The Russians would have calculated that if they could cause enough shock and trauma to the Ukrainian population over the course of 72 hours, 3, 4, 5 days, the entire country would have capitulated, and everybody would just surrender and give up anything for a decent night's sleep, just to get back to normality. And that's the reality of it. Normal civilian population, we don't like our circadian rhythms being disrupted. And it's only a credit to the fact that the Ukrainian people, as well as most of East European countries neighboring Russia, they have this idea that like invasion is imminent, and they were ready, and they were resilient, and they were ready for it. It just goes to show the importance of knowing your limits in terms of sleep deprivation and getting a very good night's sleep. That's all I have to say. Take care.